Welcome. I'm Ellen McCluskey, Curator of the Nanaimo Art Gallery. It is my pleasure to be speaking with the artists Deryk Houston for Seeking Peace and Amy Loewan, Illuminating Peace, a theme that they are passionate about and that is realized in this exhibition.
My characteristic of my art practice is the integration of Eastern sensibility with Western postmodern art practice. Because my training is in the West and I'm Chinese from the East, so my work is about the integration of the two, East and the West. The thought that I had and still have is that if one is a true artist, one is destined to be a giver of material and the immaterial, and give with abundant joy and happiness. And I think this sums up my vision and my goal as an artist.
How have your formative years, like you've traveled quite a bit and you've lived in a number of different countries,
Yes.
and how has that impacted you as an individual that has immigrated to Canada and also having lived in countries such as Australia and Hong Kong?
Yeah, actually a big impact to have the opportunity to travel and then live in different cultures, and that enrich one's experience and seeing diversity in people, in culture, in thinking, in the food we eat and how we talk to each other and how we relate, and so it really has helped me to formalize my as a human being, and of course the art is an expression of oneself.
What has your experience been with peace and what does it mean to you personally?
Now I personally, because I was born up actually at the end of when Second World War was finished, and so my parents gave me the name Peace in Chinese. So my experience of peace is not so much I have experienced like war and therefore I feel this need to seek peace. It's more to do with basically a very important aspect of a human being to attain a sense of peace in terms of relationships. The relationship is to do with oneself, relationship with one's family, and relationship with a larger society, and therefore, a much larger society and the environment. So this is my way of addressing my work, is to do with relationships. I created this peace project for the turn of the millennium, for 2000, because at that time I thought, what shall I do? I'd like to do a big project, Prior to that, I was very involved with the kindness movement, the Random Act Kindness movement. And then at the turn of the millennium, I decided to do a bigger project. So basically in this peace project, I have chosen 8 words as a form of departure for people to contemplate about peace. As I said, it's about relationships. And the 8 words are compassion, kindness, respect, understanding, patience, tolerance, gentleness, and forgiveness. And they only serve as a point of departure because there are many more words that are equally important. And then I have chosen and used over 35 different world languages. This is how this project is, using language. My work is about integration of the East and West. So when I did this project, I went back and looked into my own heritage. And so I selected the material from the basic elemental Chinese material, which is rice paper and ink. Can't be any more basic and elementary than that. So I basically used rice paper and ink and charcoal to create this work.
Actual and symbolic connectivity of weaving, writing, and raking is methodical and reflective. Forms are interwoven, illuminated, and transformed by your manipulation. Can you elaborate on the significance of the process?
Now, weaving, because this project is talk about relationships, about human understandings, we're talking also about how we affect each other. And what better thing to use is the idea of weaving. Because by weaving, you are integrate and you are intertwined, and that conveys the message of that aspect. So the material, like I have a big sheet of rice paper and I cut it up and I folded it to make each strand is folded 4 times. So all this is all hand cut and folded to kind of weave them in and out and weaving. Actually, it's a very simple weave. So some of the words you can see, I purpose, like for example, compassion. You can see the words. And this is Chinese, and this is Arabic, and this is Hebrew, English, of course, and this is Sanskrit, and Chinese, Korean, Japanese. So it's all these languages. And sometimes, like for example, in this piece, some of the work you can see, and some part of it I purposely let it kind of interwoven into it so that you can't really read the word. And that's what's good with weaving, because you can hide something behind and let it come out again. And if you want to come over here, this is all the languages here are computer generated. Yes. So this is element of integration again. It's about using computer generated, which is modern technology. And like for example, this piece here, if you can come by here, and then you also see a lot of brushwork. And this is my hand brushwork, because again, go back to my tradition, using the brush and expressing emotion and feeling. And then here you can see all the words you cannot see, you cannot read what it is. And the idea for me is, again, is to break down the barrier. You know, communication is more than words we say. There's so many more in it. And this is the idea of breaking down the barrier. Yeah, I did change in terms of the weave, you know, like this one is a bigger weave, and some of them are smaller weave, see? So I did change, you know, like this is the last piece. Like this is, you see, you can see some of them are very thin, and some of them are very thick, okay? And then you also see the pockets of white in between the darkness. And that is, that's when I am moving the paper, you know. So just like you said, you know, when I'm creating it, I started to create new things. Because by moving it, it gave me the idea of shifting. And when we talk about building peace, about relationship, quite often we have to make shifts in our thinking, in our behavior. So by creating the work, it gave me some kind of insight about the process. The process gave me the insight. I use a lot of symbols in my work. Of course, the 8 words and the many languages. And it's a symbol of the circle and the square that I use in this work. And you can see very predominantly the circles. And here, 2 pieces together makes a square, okay? And then you can see very subtly there's a circle here, see? So again, it's a circle and square, because circle and square has a lot of meanings to many cultures. And to the Chinese tradition, circle reference to the heavens and earth reference to earth. So it's about the universe. And circle also means, like, you know, no beginning and no end. Circle is about, you know, wholeness, about the world, so people can read into it, but it's basically a sense of wholeness. That's what I'm going to convey. And that in itself doesn't mean you have to feel very calm, peaceful, but it's really for you to look inside yourself and then discovering who you are, and then make changes. And the only person can do that is yourself. And this is providing a space for contemplation. Because I search into Chinese philosophy a lot, and also like the idea of the Taoism and the yin yang symbol, you know, from dark to light, which this is basically a yin and yang symbol, or from dark unto light and then dark unto light again. but it's not duality because the circle connects them. So it talks about the change of seasons. You have dark to the light, light to the dark. You have sadness and you have joy, and then sadness and joy is all part of human experience. Sometimes you're very successful, and then there will be failure too. So it's all part of human experience. So this is the idea of yin and yang, idea of dark and light, but all these are part of our human experience.
Mother Teresa affirmed, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. Have you symbolically chosen this diversity of language as part of a prescription for realizing world peace?
Yeah, I agree with Mother Teresa said, and because what's more important is how we relate to each other, and that's the bottom line of it. How we relate to each other, and then we relate to the bigger world. In this project, I also use grain in my work. As you can see, the wheat in this under the lantern, and in the Peace project, I use rice because, first of all, it's for aesthetic reasons. You know, when you create art, I think it's so important that it takes people into seeing your work. And because this lantern at the bottom there's a big metal stand, so I have to cover it up with something, right? So this is a good solution. And then also because grain and rice are food, right? It's food for the body, and art is food for the soul. And it's about this is really reference to food, reference to distribution of wealth, reference to distribution of food, poverty, and yeah, I mean, there's the world majority is rice and wheat. This is a Cree, and this is Russian. This is Carmantia. This is Latin, Chinese, English, Korean, Sanskrit, Japanese, Hebrew, and this is Icelandic. So you can see, I would not like people to do that, but for you, I will do it. So as you can see, there's a stand inside. The bottom is a metal. I have asked a sculptor to build there's a plate at the bottom, solid, keep the weight. And on top you can see it's a pole, like a big umbrella. And my husband constructed that part in the top. So it's like a big umbrella, and all the pieces are hung in each corners. And it's quite a challenge, okay? So that's the center of it. And that's each piece, again, this one is done differently because, as you can see, in order to allow the light to come through, the weave is not solid. I have pockets, and then so I weave first with gaps in between, as you can see, and then I put a piece of paper behind it, and that's it. So in constructing a lantern, there are 8 panels, and they're all different. Again, this is rice paper, and on this work, the paper is cut instead of folded like in the Peace project. This one, the strips are cut, and then weave, and then behind I back it with another piece of rice paper, and the material I use is good glue. It's called good glue. I'm not sure they make it anymore, but you can use what they call archival water-soluble glue, because everything is archival. And all the languages are printed on the computer, again on cotton rag paper. You can buy those cotton rag paper. And then the edges, you can see this is silk. This is silk. And therefore, the silk gives a nice support like a scroll, you know. So this is what the material is. And this is another calligraphy of the word heart. This one. And then this is an interesting piece.
You invite the viewers to write or draw their visions of peace onto pieces of rice paper and weave them into a panel. What do you hope to achieve through this interactive component that exists in Illuminating Peace?
Because what I want people to achieve basically is after they view the exhibition, they can actually respond in a concrete way by writing something. It's a concrete way of their own response. And then I use people's writings into my art, which is, for example, in this panel, that you can see these are people's writings. I study in the West, like I study art and I came to study United States. And at that time there was no computer. And so my mother often sent me letters, that's the day people was writing letters. And then in 1997, my mother was very ill, and so I went back, and subsequently she passed away. So I went back to Canada, and after that in 1997, I started reading some of the letters she wrote me when I was studying overseas in my 20s. So I started reading some of the letters, and one of the letters she said, "Your children are like lantern to me." And then at that time, the idea of lantern is planted like a seed in my mind, the idea of lantern. So that means how much she placed her hope in us as children, as well as how much she respects us, to give her hope, to give her future. So when I decided to make another project as a sequence to the peace project, I say, a lantern would be good, because a lantern is a symbol of hope, a symbol of future, and it gives light. So what's the best thing to do? It's about, giving light.
I was very lucky to run into an artist, Jan Johnson. He had a similar interest. Both of us shared a common interest in war and trying to find peace. And he has a beautiful, in the forest, he's laid out a lot of his experiences in Vietnam. And when I seen that, I just thought, oh God, I could use these nicely in my exhibit, because they look like the kind of thing I'm looking for, And so I was able to get permission from Jan before he left us to use these.
That's very much part of the show, is that element of hope.
Oh, absolutely. And to be able to find it, seeking it and being able to find it. I think that there's a lot of things that we can do in our society to help us find that peace and that path to peace. So basically the idea is to come into the exhibit, you get a choice of going down an empty path down that way, or you can go this way. Hopefully people will choose to go this way. If they go the other way, it's not a disaster to me, but I'm hoping that people will be drawn by their curiosity to take in some of these things here. I wanted the exhibit to start off fairly dark, fairly macabre, kind of on the dark side, a little maybe trying not to be too heavy-handed, but at the same time leaving people with an impression of feeling of unease and not very nice visual images, and I found some of these things of Jan Johnson's, like the little figure on the tricycle, like, they just suited what I, character-wise, what I wanted, so I was lucky to get those. Then hopefully people will come around this way here. This idea here is it's almost like as if there's a bit of a blast wave, where people would, from the explosion that happened inside the Amarita bomb shelter. So I want people to come from the darkness out following what looks like a brighter area here. But as they do come around this corner, they'll be aware of the fighter jets overhead. But I want people to definitely have a sense of brightness over there. I also want people to have a sense of that what started off maybe as just walls, they now see it as laundry, and the whole idea of this, part of this idea was this woman that took me through this shelter, the bomb shelter. She survived simply because she had decided at the last minute to go do some laundry at home. During a war, and bombings and things like that, life still has to go on. There's still a sense of normalcy to the whole thing. So they do things like go out and do laundry, go out and get food, that kind of thing. So I built a frame to support the main heavy structure, which is where I have all this glass hanging, which you'll see at the next stage as we go through. So I've played with space. I've kind of tried to make it so that it directs you through in a gentle way, so that you don't feel necessarily you're just following, you know, a path, one set path. But I wanted to see that there would be some areas that maybe you could go in there, but you can't go that way. It's like a seeking peace. You know, you try and go one way, you have to go back and go another way. And just from a visual point of view, just try and keep it interesting, stimulating to the brain, because the brain does get kind of bored pretty quick, you know. And so I've tried to create a variety of kind of solutions to, you know, trying to break up that space, to take you one way and dead end, have to come back, you know. So you try and, it's just like if you're painting, you have to try and stimulate the eyes of the viewer in certain ways without using the same trick every time, you know. And so as you come this way more, we get into the light is more prominent, creating more shadows, more light, more folds, more the folds themselves are almost more, have an organic kind of quality to it, like more lifelike, like folds in people's clothing. And but I've also added some laundry in here with children's, puts a more personal touch to the thing, so that it's more human. It's also a much more positive thing than the first images we saw of the children, the dolls disfigured and broken. And this is almost more hopeful in a way, because it's more normal. It's more like a normal life, normal scene, where things might improve, things can get better. So that's all part of it that went into the thinking of it. And then as I come into this area here, this what you're ultimately aiming for is this column of light, which is what, you know, we went through in the real Amarillo bomb shelter. We went through pretty concrete, bare structure, just like the underground parking lot, you know, where you park and go do your shopping. This is similar kind of a place, except that when you come around the corner, you see this beam of light, and I wanted to try and portray that in a way that would be physically interesting, visually stimulating, and I love the qualities of glass. You know, a glass works best under light, and so in the glass, all the glass is touchable, although wouldn't like people grabbing it, but if they do, because a lot of people will reach out just to touch, they're all being melted in the kiln, so that they're you won't cut your hands. But it's also kind of reflects the heat of this massive explosion inside the real Amarillo bomb shelter, like molten glass that's been reshaped. And so it kind of maybe, you know, plays on that a little bit. In the beam of light that I saw, we saw some birds coming floating in and flying around inside this beam of light. So it's one of the reasons I have the projections of the birds on the sheets, and a little animation there. Nothing complicated, just a little gesture, you know, to recognize that. And the same in here on the frosted glass. I've got little imprints of some of the doves and things that I put in there, just for, you know, most people probably wouldn't even notice it, but they might, you know, and if they do, that's great.
Well, they might see that connection.
So, yeah, and yeah, it's I know it's there, and that's one of the important things, you know. It's, for me as an artist, I know it's there, and that's that cathartic thing again, you know. It doesn't matter if anybody else sees it. I know it's there, and it. I also like the sound. The glass can kind of bang away, and there is a gentleness to that. I saw Elizabeth making wind chimes. She makes wind chimes and with glass, and I thought, well, if they can take that much beating, you know, from being out hanging out on a tree, you know, small ones, I thought, why can't we go a little bigger and use them in this column of light, you know. Glass is amazingly strong product. It's definitely got beautiful qualities to it.
So looking at the glass and the light, and also the play of light and shadow with the birds, what is the importance of light in terms of the role of light in this exhibition?
The one place that I found in that whole shelter that offered some kind of sanity, some kind of hope, especially with the birds in there, the gentleness of those. I think somebody I know said it best when they said that the birds that are coming in through there sort of amplify the beauty. In fact, it was you that said that. But the birds, they're coming in from above and into that beautiful, almost spiritual light. They just was such a huge contrast to the violence that was all inside that room, you know, and knowing what happened to the people inside that room. I mean, it was such a catastrophic, violent explosion that people were just completely evaporated, you know. In fact, the same way as you see at Hiroshima there with the x-rays of people's images on the walls, there was a woman breastfeeding her child that you could actually see. You could make out the image of this woman breastfeeding the baby. So 1 minute, 1 second, one split fraction of a second she's there, and the next thing she's just an x-ray, you know. And so this gentle light in contrast to that violence is something that just puts everything into perspective of where we're at. So to see the birds coming in there, to see the sunlight, just gave me, you know, that there is beauty out there in the world that is worth preserving, even if it doesn't seem like it's possible with the surroundings that you're in sometimes. You definitely have to try and hold on to that. Just like if you're swimming, you can't give up. You know, if you're out in the middle of the ocean, you're looking for an island over the horizon, and you could stop swimming, or you can keep going. And when you see the sunlight come through that place and those birds in there, then there's a little bit of a ability to hang on and hope that there'll be better things. It totally changed my life and made me want to dedicate myself to the subject of peace. They describe it as a life-altering journey, you know, and it definitely does that, you know. You can't look at anything else again in the same way.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your philosophy of peace and how that's impacting some of the new directions you're going with your work?
Yeah, well, you know, peace is something that definitely will probably, you always have to work for. There's always elements and things that are going to try and squelch it and for their own benefits. And so peace is something that it takes work. It takes, it's not going to go away. We have to work on it. And I certainly have full intentions that will be the focus for the rest of my life. One of the things I'm doing right now is I did this Peace Sanctuary project up north using the bulldozer, mother and child image on the ground, earthenwork. And I want to go into the second phase, which is to make it into a Peace Sanctuary project, you know. It's a sculpture project, Peace Sanctuary Sculpture Park. And I've actually formed a society, a legal society, so even after I'm gone, there will be people in that society that will continue to encourage people, sculptors, to donate any of their works, sculpture works that are related to peace, to donate it before a committee that would review it and say, yes, we want this in the sanctuary. So this summer coming up, 2012, we're driving down to the States to pick up a sculpture that's been donated to us that we're going to be driving back. We thought about just having it shipped, but we thought it'd be it's almost like you don't have your baby shipped from the hospital, you go and you bring it home, right?
Yes.
And so we're going down to pick it up, and the following year we'll install it at the Peace Sanctuary. So those are the kind of projects that I'm working on. I notice that in other artists' works who are often getting involved in these issues, it's extremely hard on them, you know. It was extremely hard on me, but they either get through it or they can actually find the magic path that leads them out of it into something more positive. And I think when you actually do find that path, as I think I have, it's better for yourself. It's better for the opportunity of maybe sharing peace with other people. Part of the hope is social media. I think that we're entering a new world with communications between people. It's harder for people who are in power and who hold all the strings to power. It's harder for them to pull the wool over our eyes and have their way, you know. So I'm actually very excited about where, you know, how education can change things. It can give you hope. It's not just like a, you know, oh, I hope it happens. You know? It's like it is happening, you know, because of these things. So, and art shows and art can make people even more aware of that.